to believe in myself and realize that something bigger was going to take control and lead me down the path that I needed to be led. And you know what? It wasn't into speaking. Like it didn't go, all right, I'm going to start speaking today. And then it exploded from there. It actually came down the path of,
I'm about to bring to you a conversation with Michael Crossland, who is a motivational speaker here in Australia, who just in the last 12 months has spoken to more than 300,000 people across 22 countries in total. He has shared stages with Richard Branson, with Tony Robbins, and he has an incredible personal story which is full of trials and tribulations and victories. And I wanted to get Michael on the podcast. I've been connected to him for a while through digital and social, as most of us are. But I wanted to get him on the podcast after actually hearing him speak at a lunchtime event with 150 people in the room. And he does promise in his digital material to bring a tear and move the heart of anyone in the audience. And he definitely did that to me. And he did that to a room full of people. And that strength and power and grace that he brings to the platform, which has seen him accelerate his impact. Once you listen to this episode, you'll understand just why the driver of impact was so important for him and what it's created for him. But his ability and his drive to accelerate impact, it's just, I have no more words. I simply want to invite you to settle in and to listen to this incredibly powerful conversation with Michael Crossland. Welcome back to the Speaker Driven Business Podcast, and I am literally delighted to bring this conversation to you today with the one and only incredible Michael Crossland, who is a motivational speaker here in Australia. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks so much for having me.
I'm doing really, really well. And actually, I'm going to start off with, I just said, you're a great speaker here across Australia, but I know you go everywhere. Where in the world are you right now?
I'm home. Can you believe it? It's been a while. I just finished a 3-week speaking tour throughout the States and then did the Australian tour, and now I'm home for 2 weeks. And one thing that I really pride myself on is when I'm home, I'm really home. I'm really present. The phone stays in the top drawer, and you're not looking at my forehead, you're looking into my eyes, and it's just so good to be back.
I love that. Whereabouts is home?
Oh yeah,
not specifically. We don't need your Google address. Yeah, we don't need your Google address, but whereabouts is home?
Yeah, sorry. I live on the beautiful east coast of Australia called Coffs Harbour, little surfy village, and it's a great part of the world. We're actually now a little bit further west. We're about 7 minutes from the beach now, on the other side of the highway on some property, and it's super quiet, and we've got no neighbours, and it's just a dream come true. So always good to come home and switch off.
Yeah, no wonder why you can switch off, because that sounds like heaven on earth. You're known now. I'm going to pull a line from your website. It says, Michael Crossland is sure to bring a tear to your eye and a smile to your heart. And I'm going to actually go there because I have been in your world digitally for a while, connected on social media. And then you spoke at a lunch that I was at probably about 2 months ago now. And it wasn't just me. You slayed the room. We were all in tears. I think on that particular occasion, you were as well. It was the Kingdom Entrepreneurs Network lunch here in Brisbane. And I've got to know you through all of that. But for our audience, tell us about Michael. Who is Michael? How did you get here? What's going on? What's your story?
To me, as you would have heard, I really believe that I'm just an ordinary old Australian that's faced my fair share of challenges and adversity, and now incredibly privileged and blessed to have a platform to travel the world and share my story with people. And I think that I'm extremely humble in being able to do what I'm doing globally, and sometimes I've got to stop and pinch myself and think, I can't believe that people want to hear what I have to say. People want to actually take on board the way I look at life and how I'm living my life, and hopefully inspiring people to not just be a better employee, to not just be a better employer, but more importantly, maybe to be a better mom, a better dad, a better brother, a better sister, a better friend, a better neighbor, and just show kindness in the world and give back to the world. Because, I have faced my extreme darkness moments. I've had those times where I've been on the knife edge and I didn't know which way it was going to go. And, it all started back when I was 11 months old, diagnosed with an incurable cancer of the central nervous system called neuroblastoma. Stage 4, doctors said there was no chance of survival. But my mum, my sweet mum, and I'm sure we'll talk about her a lot today, but she asked one question. I don't want to know what the chances are of my son dying is. I just want to know what the chances are of my son surviving is. And they flipped the script and said that I had a 96% death rate, no chance, go home. Allow him to live the next few months with his family. But how often do we look at the glass being half empty as opposed to half full? And my mum simply chose to look at my life being 4% full and not 96% empty. And I had chemo, 9 days on, 3 days off for nearly 3 years, and that wasn't working. I had surgery. They couldn't get rid of all the tumors. It was between my internal organs and my spine, and then it started to grow and rapidly spread up my aorta. It was wrapped around my spine. It was growing in my heart. They couldn't get it all, and they said that was it. But then there was a trial drug they were going to trial on 25 people around the world, and I really believe that outside of love, hope is one of the most powerful words in the English dictionary, and that's what it gave us. It gave us hope. And as you know, we started the trial drug. Within 90 days, 24 out of the 25 of us had died. They burned us from head to toe. We were covered in blisters to keep us alive. They would lay us in baths full of ice, trying to prevent our brains from frying. And, I always say that I'm one of the lucky ones, but I never say I'm one of the lucky ones because I'm still alive. I say I'm one of the lucky ones because it wasn't my mum. All I had to do is lie in bed and feel the pain. But my mum had to make a choice to inject a drug into a child that's killed every single person that ever taken it. And I've discovered at very, very recent times that it is so much easier lying in the bed than standing next to it.
Yeah, it struck me, and I had heard you speak into the decision that your mother made to look at the 4%. But when you actually talked about it in person, and this is one of the things that actually we probably will unpack as we do this, the resonance and the gravity of that really struck. The fact that this woman, and as mothers, we hope that we will all do that, right? But she actually she didn't just go, okay, great, 4%, let's see what we can do. She didn't accept anything else, did she?
That's right. And, as you know, there's been many, many more health challenges from there. And even, I reflect on when I was 12, my big dream was to play baseball in America. And unfortunately, I had a heart attack when I was 12 from the side effects of the drug. And they said I'd, never go to school and I'd never play sport again. And she comes through the curtain after the doctors told her this. And I made out I didn't hear what the doctors said. And I said, what did the doctors say? And she said, oh, the doctors told me that everything was going to be okay. And yes, that's just a throwaway line and a phrase that many of us use, but I really genuinely believe that she believed it. And I think that she believed it so in depth that it rubbed off on me. And there were so many times throughout my life where I'd been told that that was not an option, and that, if you make Christmas, when I was diagnosed again in 2016, they said, if you make Christmas, it'll be a miracle. And I got a chance to return that favor to my mum, and she said, what did the doctors say? And I said, oh no, the doctors told me that everything was going to be okay. And I think when you genuinely put it out there and you verbalize it, you manifest it, you pray on it, it's remarkable what can come true. And she is just a courageous woman that has been my rock and my inspiration my entire life.
That level of conviction, because you had actually heard the doctor say the opposite, but that level of conviction, what it makes me feel is that conviction is transmissible, right? That level of conviction that your mother had became your level of conviction, and actually is a lot of what pulled you through. When you said, the heart attack at 12 and never go back to school and never play sport, and obviously you had your heart set on that sort of career, how as a teenager do you come back from that and rejoin normal, whatever that is?
I think I've always understood that phrase, no one in your life is ever going to tell you what you can do, they'll only ever tell you what you can't, but it's our choice whether we choose to listen. And I think from a little boy, that was embedded so deeply in my life and the way I looked at the world. And for me, I think it was just tell me what I can't do and I'll show you that I can. But I think there's a really big distinct difference in the world that we live in now around that phrase, because I think it's not about proving other people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And I think there's this notion now in the world where people want to do things and achieve things to prove other people wrong. But the problem is when they achieve it or they accomplish it, it was out of false emotion. You were only doing it to prove someone else wrong, as opposed to that emotional joy and that humility of proving yourself right. And as you led to, my dream was to play baseball in America, and at the age of 12, they said I'd never be able to do that. And 2.5 years later, I made the under 16 Australian Expos team. I got to go to America and play baseball. I was lucky enough when I was 17 to pick up a scholarship to go to school over there, study sports psychology in Texas. And, yeah, it was tough being away and being on the other side of the world from my family. But I think that to be able to achieve and accomplish something that everybody in your life, besides your family, have told you is impossible, was amazing. And I wanted to be the guy that did 10% extra, that allowed me to fall into the 1% category, to be that person to achieve my dreams. And as you know, unfortunately, my health took a big turn when I was over there, and I was only over there for 6 months before my heart said, this is too much, and I was back in hospital and then sent back to Australia and never played baseball in America again. And I guess, yes, there is that component of being crushed that the dreams are over, but there's also this sense of immense pride knowing that I've been able to do something that I set my heart and my soul into achieving.
I think it's actually, I love the distinction of you still achieved, right? You still actually you did go to the US. But that distinction as well, if we can just circle back to that, of 10% extra to be in the top 1%. Tell us more about that, because I know that that's part of the message that you share. Just 10% extra gets you to that 1%.
There's this great line, and I'm sure many of you've heard it, I'm sure you've heard it a million times, and it's about, it's what you do when no one's watching that ultimately determines the heights of our success. And I was the guy that always was last to do 10 laps around the oval because I was the only guy doing 11. And I was always last doing 100 push-ups because I was the only guy in the team doing 110 push-ups. And I remember the story, I think I may have shared it on stage when you were there. We were in this circle, and our coach was just yelling at us as he did. He was a big Texan guy, and he had, chewing gum in one side and chewing tobacco in the other side. And he was spitting, it was wild. And but what I noticed was, as soon as the coach would turn his back on us and face the other way, the guys either side of me would lock elbows, and they'd just look up and wait until he turned around. And as he turned around, they kept going. So maybe out of the 100 that we were meant to do, they might have done 60 or 70. And I didn't want to be that guy. And whether that hurt me or not, I think that it laid the foundation for when I transitioned into corporate world and even into this speaking world. I've been doing it 15 years now. Was that don't take the shortcut. Don't do the easy route that you think is going to enable you to get you to where you need to be. Because that great phrase that everyone's heard, if you do what is easy, then your life will be hard. But if you do what is hard, then your life will be easy. I want to be that guy. And I did all the hard yards, and now I'm, 41 years old, and I'm in a place where I can pick and choose to do what I want to do, and I have unbelievable amounts of freedom and remarkable flexibility. And I do my gratitude text to my clients. I have sort of 10 coaching clients that I work with every day, and it's so nice to be able to share with them. We had a few character building moments yesterday, and I needed to course correct and make some changes in my schedule. And it was a moment where I just said, I'm just so grateful that I've done the hard yards, which have enabled me to have the flexibility and the freedom to make these choices, to be able to be present and serve and support when I need to. And it just was this wonderful full circle moment of like those moments of hard yards and the suffering and the pain and the exhaustion and the sleepless nights, to now be in a position where I can have that type of freedom.
Yeah, it's one of my favourite quotes, and it applies to everything. I think is a previous coach in AFL from South Australia, and his quote is, "People think you rise to the occasion, but you don't. You sink to the level of your training." And I think the way that you just explained that epitomises that. It's obviously how you've run at everything. When you came back from the US, because your heart decided it actually wanted to be at home, when that heart ache and break actually made you come back to Australia, where did you go from there? Because that would have been a readjustment again.
Yeah, there was that transition was difficult because I so wanted to be over there, but I got so sick when I was over there, I couldn't stay over there and had to come back. And then I got a job somehow in banking. I still don't even know how I got it, and I was like a greeter at the front door of a bank down in Newcastle, and I was dating a girl from down there at the time, so it was extremely convenient. And then I met the CEO one day, and my mum, she always embedded this saying, "Shoot for the moon, and if you miss, you'll end up in the stars."
Under the
Yeah, I
stars.
want to be that
Yes.
guy. And he said, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?" And I don't know where it came from, but I just responded with, "In 5 years' time, I'm going to take your job." And I learned quickly you never say that to the CEO, because it didn't I thought it was going to be, received as like this passionate, determined, driven guy, but it was perceived as this arrogant little, And but
Little guy in the
yeah,
front door.
I really worked smart. I was enabled by my leaders to fail. They enabled me to fail fast and forward and often. And I realized that if I invested in my team when I was good enough to have a team, to make them be able to achieve the results that we needed to achieve when I was no longer present, then they would just move me up the pecking order. And I climbed the corporate ladder very, very quickly. Hundreds of staff, 100 and I think it was 120 odd banks at one stage. And as you know, I was unfortunately also driven by the three P's that I think destroy people. I was driven by power, privileges, and possessions. And I've worked out now there's nothing wrong with having a beautiful big home and driving beautiful cars and wearing nice clothes. But back then, I wanted all those things to prove to other people my worth and my value. And now I I'm almost at that point where it doesn't matter what other people think of me. It's been a long, slow progression of drowning out the negative voices in our world and not allowing the weight of the words of others to impact me. I feel as though we should never allow those that we wouldn't accept advice from to criticize us, because we should never let that criticism land. So, as you know, I climbed the corporate ladder. I did very, very well for myself in banking, but I was driven by ego and arrogance, and it took me to hit rock bottom in 2010, 2009, 2010, for everything to just find the purpose in life.
What happened in 2009, 2010?
So it sort of manifested off of mum and dad separating in 2007. I invested all of my mum's money in 2008. That was about 6 weeks before the GFC hit, and I unfortunately lost all my mum's money. Yeah, I failed her. I failed her as a son. Um, I felt like a father as a man, and I was very ashamed of who I had become, and but I realized that the two greatest days in one's life is the day that we are born and the day that we discover why we are born. And sometimes we discover that in our darkest moments, and I needed to get there, and that was the path that took me to great darkness. And I remember saying to her so clearly, "I promise you, I'll make this right. I don't know how and I don't know when, but I promise you, I'll make this right." And as you know, I did, but we'll get to that. But I got really sick in late 2009. I got bacterial meningitis. I got fluid on the brain. Then I had Bell's palsy, and I'd had enough. I didn't want to fight anymore. And my wife would come in every night and she'd say, "I love you," and I'll see you in the morning. And I would wait for her to get out of the room, and I'd say, "I love you," and goodbye. And that was a very long, 4 or 5 months of darkness and not wanting to live. And I would pray to God every night in hospital that I'd go to sleep and not wake up. And I kept waking up, and I think,
He wasn't
no,
listening.
no, well, he was course correcting me, that's for sure. And I began to realize that all I needed to do was understand two things, and my world had changed, and that was what success was and what giving is. And now I realize that success is about getting out of bed every single day and knowing in my heart that I can make a difference in somebody else's life. And the whole giving piece, I realize now that it's we must give without remembering and receive without forgetting. And that's when I walked away from the corporate world. I had a dream and a goal to make a global impact, and I took a great risk. And people told me I was crazy, and it was without a doubt the greatest decision that I've made for me personally, emotionally, professionally, and financially, to back myself and to have no plan B, because there's a lot of people in the world that have a plan A and a plan B, and when their grass looks greener in plan B, they dive into it. I forced myself to have no plan B, and I had to put all my eggs in the one basket, and I went out and I gave it everything I had. And 7.5 years later, it finally came to fruition. And
Landed.
it was about,
Yeah. And I love this because it was such a long time. I'd like to just dig into the speaking career for a moment. Most of our audience are people looking to speak, and actually we're discovering a lot of people who are actually established and looking to go to the next level. When you walked out of that hospital knowing that you wanted to leave corporate, knowing that you wanted to make an impact, remembering that it took 7.5 years. But if we go back to that moment when you just knew, I want to make an impact on the world, I'm here to make a difference at a global level, did you have any sense of how that was going to happen?
I had to walk with faith. I had to believe in myself and realize that something bigger was going to take control and lead me down the path that I needed to be led. And you know what? It wasn't into speaking. Like, it didn't go, all right, I'm going to start speaking today. And then it exploded from there. It actually came down the path of, we've been told we'll never be able to have a family. So we decided to go to Haiti, where an earthquake hit in 2010 and 316.
And that would have been fairly confronting, actually, going straight in after that earthquake
It was horrific.
hit.
Yeah, 316,000 people died. 2.5 million people were homeless. Unemployment rate was 85% on an island of 10 million people, and the island is one third the size of Tasmania. And it was just. It now has been named I think the most dangerous country in the world outside of a war zone. It is just. It's wild.
Wow.
We had to have security guards, and I was lucky enough to go and do some work with the Toronto Blue Jays because baseball was my world, and one of the coaches remembered the story and wanted me to go and do some stuff with the Blue Jays at their spring training camp, and I was asked to go down with some amazing friends here in Coffs Harbour, and it changed us. It changed me as a man. It changed me as a human being. Obviously, as a speaker, it definitely made me look at my mum differently, and my dad, and my whole family.
Did you have any expectations going into Haiti? Like you were
I
invited
went
down
down there to
there.
just help some friends, and I thought that was it. I was going to go there, help build a school, and go home. And then I realized that there's people in the world that are donating tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to charities around the world. And 85% of that goes to admin fees and paying the big cats on the top. And, a small portion of that goes to the kids or the need. And that's why we, with some friends, started Frontier Projects, where every cent gets sent. We're less than 1% of charities in the world, where every dollar gets donated, and all of us are volunteers. No one gets paid. Even the accountant that does the books, he donates his time. And that for me was this moment of like, man, this is real impact. Like this is impact serving people, and I'm actually on the ground doing it. And we have 270 kids at our school, 11 teachers, principals, counselors. It was amazing. And then to meet, a little boy eating food out of a garbage bin who lost his mum and dad and both his brothers in the earthquake, and to have to try and help find him an orphanage to live in, and then to get to the point where we ended up just, I lost my heart that day. I didn't realize that there were people in the world that had faced unbelievable pain and sadness and loss and grief, yet woke up every single day with this immense amount of joy and gratitude because they woke up. And that's when, we went down and rebuilt the orphanage. And now my wife and I, we have 44 of the cutest little babies that we get to look after 365 days a year. And so much so that now we found out that many of the parents were actually still alive. So now we've started training and development centers to create micro businesses for their parents so that they can be self-sustainable and have their kids back. And now we only have 20 kids in the orphanage and not 44. So it's amazing to be in a position to think a little, step out of our own little bubble in our own world, and be able to serve these kids from a point of view where we know that the greatest place for them to be is with their families, and to actually listen. We think we know what they want, but that's so often not the case. We had a group here in Australia donate a heap of laptops for the school in Haiti, and they said, we need you to take these laptops over and get a photo with the kids on the laptops. The school doesn't have power. The school doesn't have a generator. The school doesn't have a water tank. The school doesn't have. So what I thought, exactly. Let's auction off the laptops, use the money to buy a generator or water tank or what have you, you know. And we think that what we know is right, but often it's not. And that's the same with a leader. That's the same with anything, you know. Like, I love that phrase. We need to get curious, not furious. When we get frustrated with our team, we need to get curious in behind, but understanding the behavior, not so much the fact that we know the answer and the solution. And same deal down there. You know, when we started to let them tell us what they need and do the equation of twice as much listening as we do speaking, it's amazing.
It's amazing how it works, isn't it? Like I do love, when you talked about the creating trade centers to create micro businesses for the families to reclaim their children and reunite with their children. We, through something that we do, we help to support a rescue home in Cambodia, which is young girls out of trafficking, and they get housed in this rescue home for their education. But then the task is actually to find the parents and to actually set them up in a micro business. And I hadn't realized how important that was, because if you rehome the girls with their family, they get sold again because the original problem hasn't been solved. And it's that whole thing. It really opened my eyes to the fact that we actually have no idea. We think we're doing good. We go and rescue the girls. We give them back to their families, and their families are still in the same situation, but now worse because they got the expense back. And so the young girl just gets sold back in. And like you saying, your heart breaks. And I haven't even been on the ground with that yet. Right. And it just is extraordinary to me that we have to actually go to the root cause of the problem. We can't just look at it and throw things at it that we think will work. And I'm actually really racing now, because actually my next podcast interview straight after you is with Simon Doble, who founded Solar Buddy. And so it's kind of like all dovetailing together. Tell me about throwing into loving these children because you and your wife couldn't have a family. And what did that feel for you?
I think just to roll back into what you were sharing before, and so inspiring what you're doing and the impact that you're having. I think my uncle taught me a great lesson when I was a boy, and that was, if it's important, you'll find a way. If not, you'll find an excuse. And I'm sure that many people are listening to this going, oh yeah, but we're not in a financial position to do that now, or yeah, it'd be easy for you to do it because you had money on your side, or whatever the excuses are that we come up with to justify why we're not doing things. And I didn't have money on my side. I was broke. I was not working. I had no income. I was doing everything off a oily rag just to try and make ends meet. And for me, it was just simply not find an excuse. It was find a way. And that's why the training center was so important. We couldn't give the kids back to their parents because their parents couldn't afford to take care of them. And now we've created more of a problem. So let's find a solution. So 4 areas: construction, jewelry making, clothing manufacturing, and English speaking, so they can be translators for the government. So again, it's just like looking at things a little bit differently. And where do we start? We can't open a school. We can't do an orphanage. All we're going to do is just start. Just start. Join a charity. Join something that makes your heart feel good to serve, and take the afternoon out and go and find some homeless people and listen, and care for them. So, but to your point about the kids question, and that was always a really tough pill to swallow, to be told not to go to have kids, and then to have so many little challenges along the way with the orphanage and sick kids getting really sick over there, and then as my speaking progressed, then all of a sudden I was doing like Make-A-Wish visits and meeting these beautiful kids in hospital. And, I met this beautiful boy in Adelaide, and it was my first like real connection that this family wanted to meet me. And then, I remember they called me and said, our little boy's cancer free now. And I remember just crying on the phone thinking, man, a miracle's happened. And then she said, yeah, he's now finally in heaven. He's pain free. And I was like, oh man, it's so heavy, And then they ask you to carry the coffin, and you're like, oh geez, like this is, again, I'm just an ordinary guy that's been kicked many, many times, yet I have this remarkable privilege to be able to hopefully impact these kids, to have them look at life a little differently regardless of how long they've got left. And it was so beautiful to have those unbelievable connections with those kids in Haiti. And then I was diagnosed in 2016, and I had a really amazing year that year. And it'll get to your point, but the speaking stuff finally took off. Like it was 6 years of just pushing through. Well, the seventh year was when things started, but it was like 6 years of like bashing my head against the wall, doing small kids, students, schools with, kids that didn't want to listen to you, picking their nose, and people just walking out, not wanting to know who you are. And then in 2016, 2017, I got that one opportunity, and the opportunity came off the back of a free charity gig that I did on the Gold Coast that opened up the door to an event in Sydney where all the right people were in the room. And from there, it exploded. Then, I got a chance to share the same stage as the Dalai Lama, and then the Branson thing happened. And then we had those videos go viral. I think we're up over 150 million views now. It was just crazy, crazy time. And then financially, I was in a position to finally be able to give back to my mum. And, I remember buying her this beautiful new little home in the area that she wanted to be in, and put the pink ribbon on the door, and told her that I rented it for her for 12 months. And she was so excited that she got this house that she loved as a rental for 12 months. And then I showed her the rates, and she saw my name on it and realized that it was our home and not whoever else owned it. And she's still there now. And it was just, people say, oh, geez, that you must have done really well financially. And I was like, no, the bank did really well financially because they let me buy it. But then I got really sick, as you know. 4 weeks after I bought her the house, I got diagnosed with 4 tumors in the throat. And I remember when I was at that moment and they thought that this could be it, I was like, if I get through this and I come out the other side, I'm going to go all out in making sure I achieve things that I've probably been resisting. And I think, why do we wait until we are given this end date or devastation before we actually act upon things that we really want to accomplish in our life? So when I got out of hospital, they removed 3 out of the 4 tumors. The 4th tumor was around the vocal cord. They said they couldn't do anything about it. So I said, all right, firstly, I want to create something and I want to achieve something. The first thing I wanted to create was to create a respite centre for sick kids and their families down in a beautiful little beach suburb from here, only 40 minutes south of here, called Scott's Head. So we bought this little, back in 2016, it was cheap, so that was good timing. Bought this little shack and converted it into a beautiful home, and now sick kids and their family, grieving parents stay there. And that's, for us, that just makes my heart sing. And then the other one was, we just wanted to do everything and go all out in being parents in our own country. So we did everything you could imagine. We even tried to adopt some kids from Haiti and bring them to Australia. It didn't happen, but God had other plans for me, and we ended up going down the IVF path. And a miracle happened, and my wife fell pregnant, and we were due to have a baby the end of February 2018, and my wife went into labour the 8th of December 2017, and it was just, it broke me. Nearly 11 weeks, yeah. And so we went down there. She was pumped full of every steroid known to man, and then 4 days later, on the 12th of December at 6:40 p.m., she gave birth to a very sick little boy named Lachlan James. He was taken away from us. He was put in a little glass container and stuck in intensive care unit level 3. And I remember looking up at God and just thinking, I've been a dad for less than an hour, and I already feel like a failure. So how can I possibly do this? I couldn't take his pain away. I couldn't take her pain away. And I was so lost. And what was crazy is we lived at Ronald McDonald House for 4 years when I was a sick little boy. And 30 years later, I was living at Ronald McDonald House with my own sick little boy. And I felt unworthy of using that place, And
Yeah.
it was...
I don't think anything can describe the impact of having a baby. So my youngest son was 10 weeks premature. So I know exactly that sensation. And for me, there was comparison as well, because I'd had 3 other children who were incredibly healthy, walked out of hospital within a matter of days, all the thing. And then all of a sudden, it's like you can't with taking him, and I was really ill. So for the first 48 hours, I wasn't even aware. I was so sick. We almost both lost our lives. And so that sensation of a child behind glass and the sensation when you have to actually be discharged from hospital and can't take the baby, all of those tiny steps, which when you hear about them before you experience them, you think that's hard. It's indescribable how hard it is. So I understand completely how that feels. And it's so long to get them through.
Yeah, I remember. Thanks for sharing. I remember we were about 2 months in, and they told us that he had this illness called sepsis. They said he wasn't going to make it, and it
Wow.
was heavy, but he did. So everyone, he's 7 years old. He's at school now. He's done really well, which is great. But I remember this lady. She took her little girl outside into the sunlight, and I was like, oh my god, that must be just so good, like to take your baby outside in the sunshine. And I remember saying to the doctor, I got really angry and quite rude at the doctor. And I was like, man, we've been stuck in here for 2 months as well. Blah, 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 blah. She gets to take her girl outside in the sunshine and, lay next to her on the bed. And, we're stuck in this little cold little room here. And I remember he said to me, we think you might be able to take your little boy home, but she never will. And it was this moment, instant perspective, and just shifted my whole demeanor, my whole approach, my whole anger, all the frustration just went straight into empathy mode. And I was like, oh my God, like pull myself together. And sometimes we need that moment to kick up our backside. I remember doing a gig on Sunrise a couple of days after that moment, and I realized these parents were very quickly. I'd say very quickly, because I know we got time restraints and lots of questions to get through, but they were sitting in like these mothers, mainly mothers. I was the only real dad that was in there all the time because I had the freedom and flexibility to be able to stay in hospital. And I remember there was this lady with triplets, and I was like getting one baby off one boob and putting it, and then getting the other one. Just I was like the dad that ran around helped there. It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was just that they were sitting in these horrible little chairs, these little school chairs, and all the fridges and freezers were 3 flights up. So the doctors had to run upstairs to try and get all this medication. So I went on Sunrise, and they just spoke about Lockie and my life and all this sort of stuff. And then I think it was Carl, maybe Carl, I can't remember. But they said, because they said you're not allowed to talk about anything, you're not allowed to sell anything, you're not allowed to promote anything, you're not allowed to push anything. And then right at the end, they basically gave me this spot. Like it was, and is there anything else you want to share? Like openly saying, hey, now's your time. And I was like, yeah, we started a GoFundMe page, and we need $50,000 to provide these cool chairs for all the parents and these industrial fridges and freezers to store life-saving medication and milk. And from the time I got off set to the time I got back to the hospital, we already had the money. And it was just like this moment again of like, the big guy using me for good in being able to help people that were in such desperate need. And then since then, we've gone on to have another little baby girl during COVID, and she's 4, my son's 7, and if we had them around the other way, we probably would have only ever had one because she is an.
Maybe it's a youngest child thing. I always say that about my youngest. If he'd come first, there would have been an only child. So totally relate to that. Michael, going back to, because everything was just kicking in, 2016, 2017, when you got sick, you came out, you're determined to make a difference. The refuge house was set up, which I just love, the respite house. And you said, things happened with your speaking career. Tell us about the moment when you realized in that moment, you're in Sydney in the right room, the doors opened and everything. Tell us about the moment that you realized that this was actually the way you're going to make an impact, that this was for real. Where did that point come in?
When I stopped chasing income.
Oh, tell me more, because everyone needs to hear that.
I thought that maybe the busier I got, the more money I would make. The more money I made, the easier it would be. But then I realized that if I just really lent into really chasing aggressively impact, then all that other stuff would worry about itself. And I think that's when, 16, 17 was when my profile changed in the speaking world. That's when all the bureaus wanted to know me and wanted to get you to sign exclusively. And I thought, well, if you sign exclusive, then your life changes forever. I realized that I promise you that's not how it works, as you would know. and I learned a great, valuable lesson. But yeah, when I really started to chase impact, that's when I realized that this could be huge. This could be generational for my family, and it's certainly done that. 2019, I was touring with Richard Branson, and that was massive. And then 2020, I got asked to tour with Tony Robbins, and these events, we're getting 15,000 people to come and hear me speak, and I've gone from 13 kids at a school to that many people at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, and it was just wild. And then obviously COVID hit and destroyed the whole Tony Robbins stuff, and it actually worked out quite well. I think for me, I got to really again regroup and focus on impact and not just materialism, and it was really important for me to realize that you don't need the stages, you don't need the lights, and you don't need the fame to be happy. And I really had to do some serious soul searching during COVID with no immune system and no events. I
You definitely weren't going anywhere.
I lost the man that I was, and I had to rediscover myself. And I had to be the life of the party. I had to be the guy hugging everybody. I had to be the popular guy because I never was that guy at school. I never was that person. So I created this perception of what I thought was going to bring me joy and happiness, and then it all got stripped away from me. We did 11 months in lockdown because of my immune system. We couldn't go to the cafe. We couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't go to the in-laws' house. So it wasn't all bad, but we couldn't go anywhere. But and I say this with great sincerity. I finally learnt to love me as a man, and it's taken such a long time to just look at myself in the mirror and say, you know what, I'm okay with who I am. I'm okay with not being perfect, but I'm also okay finally with not being liked by everybody. You do a gig and you get the feedback forms, and you got 500 feedback forms, and 499 of them say you were amazing, and one says, "Nah, I wasn't a fan, didn't like it," and it crushes you and it ruins you, and you can't sleep at night. And I'm like, I heard this great thing the other day, and they said, "Why does negativity or hatred or nastiness or ugliness stand out so much in this world?" It's because we're surrounded by beauty everywhere we look. We never stop to take notice of it. It just blows in, and it's just all beautiful. So much beauty in our world. So when there's this tiny little speck of ugliness, we get stuck and focused on it. There's bitterness, anger, hatred. We get caught up in it.
It's like that pinpoint that draws our attention in through the, yeah. I love so much about what you just shared. My husband and I, he talks about it very publicly, had to face the same challenge in COVID, had to stare into the mirror of who he was and to become comfortable with that man in the mirror. So I totally, as a witness to that, totally resonate with that. And as a speaker trainer with a growing business in America, when COVID hit, I definitely had to do some examination and understand who I was. What I'd love to just go back to for a moment is you talked about when you everything changed when you aggressively chased impact. How did you position for that? Because that's a positional stance. That's not necessarily a total strategy or tactic, but that's a positional stance. So how did you position for that?
I learnt to say yes to everything if off the back end of it was going to create impact. I let go of the strategic analysis of trying to create a powerful business that had a really good positive income stream and just purely focused on impact, impact, impact. The more people.
So what did impact mean to you when you said like
I
impact?
want to change audiences. I want to change lives. I want to change the way people looked at life. And the only way I could do that was to be the domino. I had to make sure that I spoke from the heart and made sure that the person I was on stage was the same person I was off stage, because as you would know, there is unbelievable disparity between many people that have made it on the speaking stage that walk off and you think, oh my God, who is that person? They're just horrible, horrible human beings. And you're like, man, you position yourself and pitch yourself as this kind, caring human being, and you're just an ugly soul, sadly. So I really wanted to make sure that was who I was. And I strategically identified areas that I could impact. I chased charities that I could donate my time to. I chased people where I felt aligned with my vision and values and freely spoke and presented. And yes, there was strategy involved. You know, if you say yes to hosting a gala dinner and there's 800 people in the room, there might be 400 businesses, there might be 200 businesses. So yes, the opportunity might bounce off the back of it. But I think in the past, I would look at that and go, okay, there's 400 businesses in the room, I'll get a couple of gigs off that. So I was chasing materialism, I was chasing work, I was chasing opportunities. But when you just stop chasing opportunities and just start really honing in on impact, then I really presented to the room in a way that I was going to impact the room, not present to the room in the hope of trying to identify opportunities to get more work. And I think,
Did that give you more freedom in how you showed up and how you
well, I
spoke?
didn't have to be strategic. I just spoke from in here, and it was so much easier rather than having to hand out business cards and make out, I was doing some coaching with a client the other day who's a speaker, and I said, what's your elevator spiel? Like, what, you've got 30, 40, 50 seconds on a plane in an elevator. And it was just this, like, just sell, 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 sell. And I'm like, man, when you downplay who you are, let your impact do the talking, people are going to gravitate to you. And, I think that's what I had to do. I just had to show my authenticity through my impact. And that opened up doors beyond my wildest dreams. And then, 3 or 4 months into COVID, work exploded online and I couldn't believe it. And then we bounced back from COVID and it just went nuts. And now I get to say no because I want to spend time with my
Which
family.
is a
Yeah,
privilege.
it's amazing. So
Yeah,
good.
which is absolute privilege. There's a couple of things I want to touch on there because what you were talking about. So, the mantra I went into doing my work was be so good they come to find you. Right. So it's like turn up and do your best and give your best. And I always say, give the best of you. You don't have time to give all of you, but give the best of you. When you actually, when you say things exploded, like there are numbers on your website, and we're not going to, I don't want to be reductionist at all, but there are numbers on your website, like 600,000 people, multiple countries around the world. When you see that quantified and put into black and white, how does that feel, particularly in relation to your this fuel that you have to make an impact? Like, how did those two marry up when you see that and there's actually black and white evidence of where Michael has
Mm.
got to?
It's funny, because people say to me, man, you've made it. You've made it. I think last year alone, it was probably 300,000 people. Audience numbers now are probably up over 4 or 5 million. And we did 22 countries. And I had a speaking tour that was 7 weeks, spoke in 11 countries across 7 weeks. It was wild, crazy. Taking my family with me so I could be there. That was really cool. That was, you come off stage, you go back to your lonely hotel room, and you walk in, and your kids are wrestling each other on the bed, and there's room service just everywhere. You become the full time cleaner when you get back into the room. But I think the numbers didn't quantify anything for me emotionally. What did was being able to have an impact globally and still not missing my kids growing up. I take my son to school every morning. Yeah, there's a bus that picks him up 20 meters down the road, but I take him to school every morning and I pick him up every afternoon when I'm home because I want to and because I can. And I can say to clients now, that 3 week speaking tour throughout the States, I just said, yeah, that's fine, but my son needs to come with me. I need to, if you want all of me, if you want the best of me, I need to take parts of me that are non-negotiable. And to be able to be in a position to be able to do that stuff is life changing. And it's generational as well. Like we came from a very, very tough upbringing financially, and now we're in a position where we're creating generational wealth for our kids. And we're not going to be the family that gives them everything because I want them to be able to work for it. But we're in a
But there's solid
yeah, the
foundations.
foundations have been set, and it's changing the surname. It's changing the Crossland name from decades and decades of pain and financial hardship to an approach of financial freedom off the back of our burning desire to impact.
I think the impact of generations is so important. When you talk about impact, there's the generational impact for your family, your bloodline, your name. What is the impact that you want people outside your family? Like you are reaching so many people now. You were aggressively chasing impact. What does that impact if we put it into a soundbite? What is that impact? What is this legacy that you're leaving?
I love the phrase, I want to inspire people to get out of bed every single day to do something that their future self will be proud of. If I can inspire people to just do something every day that enables them to reflect back and think, man, I'm really glad that I did that. The amount of times where, like even the other day, I was getting out of the car and surprise, surprise, it was raining because we're on the Coast, and there was an elderly lady walking to her car with a trolley, and like I just immediately I ran over with my umbrella and I walked her to her car and I helped her unpack the trolley and then I pushed the trolley back and it literally took me 90 seconds out of my life. And I'm not sharing that to say, oh wow, look at you, aren't you a nice guy? And I'm not doing it for that. I'm doing it because I know that I made a difference in that lady's life and she's going to go home and feel good about herself, and it cost me nothing besides 90 seconds of my time. And I hope that my son and my daughter see that and they behave in the same way when they have an opportunity to show up. And I think that I have this acute awareness of opportunities to serve other people and impact other people now. And it's like my accountability reader just starts to make this horrible noise when I'm not doing it. When I'm not doing something that can impact somebody, it's like, hey, now's the time to go and do it.
So you just said then you've developed this acute awareness. So you weren't born with this acute awareness? Is that
No
what you're
way,
telling us?
definitely not. It's muscle memory that has been trained over years and years and years of not allowing that little voice in our head to tell us why we shouldn't do something when it is the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Michael, when it comes to your journey as a speaker, what's the belief that you now hold about speaking that you would never have thought would be a belief of yours when you started this journey? So as you aggressively chased impact, you looked for breakthrough. What is the one belief that you hold now that is a result of experience?
Oh, there's so many lessons. One is you don't need to be famous to actually serve the masses. I always thought, oh, I need to have millions of followers. I need to have this. I need that. No, you don't. You just have to have a humble heart and a powerful message.
Well, no one knew your name when you
Yeah,
went to Haiti.
yeah. So a humble heart and a powerful message, and this unwavering commitment to be able to continue to sharpen the sword and refine the message until you get to really impact the audience. And like you said, they'll find you. You know, I thought I needed the billboards in New York. I thought I needed the speakers bureaus around the world, and yes, some of them can be extremely helpful and extremely kind and extremely caring and have the exact same vision and values as you. And they're remarkable people to align yourself with to be able to share your message. And when you find the right people that want to help you because you're not having this burning desire to make income, but this massive passion to make impact, and they see that, then that is a great benefit. But I think way above and beyond that is when you can be your authentic self and people gravitate to you because you just want to help people, then that's a really special thing.
That finely tuned muscle that you now have, that internal accountability meter that starts to go off, that's a progressive build. What about when it comes to telling your story? Because your story is deeply personal, deeply resonant, and yet it lands across the spectrum. It doesn't matter who's in the audience. What is it that you've learned about telling your story well and landing it well for people who you're serving from the platform?
Just because you've got a hard story, it doesn't need to be a sob story. Because
Yes. Can you repeat that a little louder for the people in the back?
yeah, I think it's so true. Though. Just because you've got a hard story or a hard life, it doesn't need to be a sob story. And I think everybody has a story. Everyone in the room has some sort of battle, some sort of darkness, some sort of pain. And when you get up there and you try and share your story like you're the only person that's faced a battle in your life, then people disconnect. But I think when you can humble yourself and realize that it could be so much worse and deliver it in a way that is real and genuine and authentic. Um, I've been doing a very recent times helping some people that want to share their message, and oh my God, their story is horrific, heartbreaking. Oh, worse than you could ever imagine. yet to be able to help them articulate it in a way that doesn't sound like a sob story, but a story of genuine kindness and forgiveness and, passion towards mankind. I think that's when everything starts to land for you.
It's one of the underlying principles of what we do and what I believe in is don't speak to it until you can speak to it with strength, power, and grace. And then once you can do that, then it's a story to share to be in service to others. Because until that point, you're not in service to anyone. Michael, I'm super curious. What was the most surprising piece of advice or feedback that you got that actually shaped a next step?
One, if we go to advice, that's probably a good one, or feedback. I remember, I remember receiving a message online on a feedback survey, and it said, "Far too evangelistic for me." And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting," because I didn't talk about God at all on stage, and that's what you took from it. And I was like, "All right, that's kind of cool," because if that's the undercurrent that you can take away from a message of a man that's faced great pain and suffering, and even, as you know, being diagnosed a couple of years ago, they found six more in my throat, and if me just sharing my story makes you feel as though there's some sort of connection with God without me even mentioning it, and then that's a reflection of you and not of me. So I think for me, it's me just realizing that I've been carried, that I haven't done this journey alone. And the feedback as well for me is like really making sure that you surround yourself with really great people that understand you and are not afraid to give you constructive feedback. My wife, she is she is my greatest fan, my greatest supporter, and my greatest critiquer, or whatever that word is. Like, you said this word seven times. She will just say it how it is, and every part of me wants to go, yeah, but they love me, or yeah, but they gave me a standing ovation, or yeah, but no, she's sharing that because she loves me. And I think when you can have somebody that's open enough and cares about you enough to kick you in the teeth when you need to be kicked, to give you feedback that's going to empower you to be better, then for me that's been, really, really fundamentally a game changer in my career as a speaker, but also as a dad and as a husband. To be able to take on feedback and actually implement change has been huge.
Yeah, amazing. One very almost last question, just and this is a bit left field, but you said then about, but I got a standing ovation, but they love me. One of the other things I say is not everyone in the room has to love you for you to land it, which leads me to the next question. Do we need a standing ovation to make a
No
difference?
way. You go to America and you get a standing ovation in your introduction. You haven't done anything yet.
Yeah.
You're a who part. Sometimes, again, it's about your feedback to yourself. How did you think it went? How did you land it? Did you get your message across? You know, sometimes, you get a standing O and you get off stage and it was like a 7 out of 10 for you because you know what you missed. They don't know what you missed. They don't know what you did. And I really make sure that in the green room I set my intention. Like, I set one word that's going to set me up for that presentation, and it might be energy, and I need to make sure that my energy levels maintain all the way through, especially when I did a trip last year where I flew over on Wednesday to Vegas. I did sound check Wednesday night, spoke Thursday morning, and flew home Thursday night because I needed to get home for my son. It was his birthday, and there is no excuses. I needed to find a way. So it was either take him with me and celebrate in Vegas for his fifth birthday or sixth birthday, or get my butt home. And I remember my intention was energy because I got about 30 minutes into my 75-minute keynote, and it was a full house. We had, I think there was 11,000 there, and I started to feel a little dip, and it was like this accountability radar. This little voice was saying, "Hey, energy, 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 energy," and that really picked me up. And so I think it's a reflection of what you feel about the event, not whether they got out of their chairs or not.
Yeah, not when they got their feet. Um, One final question, because I know we have to wrap it up. I could talk to you all day long. Um, a lot of, probably about 60% of our audience are emerging and aspiring. What's the Michael Crossland piece of wisdom you would love to leave them with?
A couple of things that I love to share is that you're as old as you've ever been, but you're as young as you'll ever be. So, like, don't wait until tomorrow to do something that you should have done yesterday, because if you do, you'll never get it done. And there's always going to be an excuse. But often there's never a better time than right now. And we always sit around and we wait for the right time, but the right time may have already passed. So for me, I've been given an end date so often. I've been told that my tomorrows aren't guaranteed, and I live my life that way. And for me, it's probably been the greatest bit of wisdom that's ever been imparted onto me, because I live it and I walk it every day, and I know that when my time is up on this earth, I've lived a life that's been filled with this unwavering commitment and burning desire to serve and make an impact and be present and love my kids and love my family, and be a humble servant filled with kindness. And they're doing a movie on me at the moment, and we were dancing in Melbourne with the camera crew a couple of weeks ago, and I was dancing and holding my beautiful daughter's hands, and the sun was shining, for the 3 seconds that it shone that day through the building, and I remember holding her, and it was this moment where I was like, man, I'm gonna wrap my arms around you. I'm gonna close my eyes. When I open them, I'm gonna be at your wedding. Like, it's gonna happen so quickly. Life is gonna be over in an instant, and I don't want to be healthy enough to walk my daughter to school. I want to be healthy enough to walk her down the aisle. And for me, that's changed the way I approach everything. It changed the way I eat, the way I sleep, the way I prioritize things, and certainly the way I love and care for myself, and the way I love and care for my family. So I think the feedback to your point is that you're as old as you've ever been, but you're as young as you'll ever be. So don't wait. Don't wait until it's too late before you decide to change.
Michael Crossland, thank you so much for your time today. This has been one heck of a conversation, and I can't wait to hear and feel what it does for everyone. Thank you so much.
God bless you. Cheers.